Let's get started.
Welcome to the Financial Purpose Podcast. All opinions expressed by me or guests of the podcast are solely our own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Life Moves Wealth Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for any investment decisions. Clients of Life Moves Wealth Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. Hey there, and welcome to episode 70 of the Financial Purpose Podcast. Good to have you with me. Sorry, I'm a little distracted, jotting my notes down. My brain's going 155 miles an hour. My hand's going 22 miles an hour slower. So, that's where we are today. Thanks for going back to the podcast. We're off to a great start. And today I'm going to do something just a little, I guess, afield, not far afield, but afield from the normal topics, but it has always a financial component. Everything in our adult lives has a financial component, has a financial outcome attached to it, has a financial decision attached to it. And the one I want to talk about today is mentorship. And in particular, I want to talk about this because it's one topic that I don't think a lot of people really talk that much about, but it is one of the most important things that someone can do for you, and it's one of the most important things that you can do for someone else when it's your turn to pay it forward. So I want to just kind of go through, this is going to be a little more of a personal subject. I'm going to tell a couple of little stories about some mentors and some impact and things like that, and then talk about how this translates to what you can do now that we're all adults and we're deep in our careers, running our businesses, leading teams of people, serving in our communities, right? All those things. And this is something that you can be mindful of when there are people who are either younger than you or newer in the career field than you, or your children as they become teenagers and young adults, or neighborhood kids who maybe don't have the role model. And there's a lot of different ways that you can plug in and give back. And so we'll talk about that. So first thing is, the reason why this topic came to mind today in particular is because on Friday night, randomly, I don't even remember how I got down the road, but I heard a song that I haven't heard probably in like 20, 25 years, I would guess, and a long time. And instantly that song transported me back to a very specific moment in a very specific time period with very specific people who I would have been around and would have been around me, and probably even sitting in the same room listening to that song. And it just took me right back to that moment. And music has like this weird thing for me. I think a lot of people have this. I asked my wife if she has it, and she said yes. And so, and it's where you can hear a song and you can instantly be transported back to whatever you were doing at a very specific point in your life. For some people, like there's a certain scent will take you back places, like maybe, if you smell like cinnamon and sugar in the air, suddenly you're at the county fair, or popcorn, you can remember watching your first movie in the theater or the drive-in or whatever, right? There's a lot of those kinds of associations, but for me, music is the most powerful one. And I was instantly transported back, and then I just started thinking about everything from that moment kind of forward, and the different people who have been very helpful for me. And so I think of mentorship as it relates to money, to be financially successful, to be successful in your career. It really does take somebody helping you get along. I really, throughout my life, I have kind of been a bit of a person who would pride myself on saying, oh, there's something about being a self-made man that is really good. And I've done a lot on my own, and I've pulled myself up, and I've made my efforts and done my things and kept driving forward. And that's how I've been as successful as I've been so far. And that's what's going to continue to take me further down my road. But the truth is, if I really think about it, there's no way I could have ever done any of this on my own. And there's absolutely been people in my life who have helped me, and I kind of think of them as I call them my bumpers, and I call them that because if you think of the game of bowling, whenever you go bowling for the first time, if you've never been before, they help you get your shoes sized right, and they're really funky shoes anyway, and you slide all over the place, and then they put the little bumpers down in the lane, and then they give you that little ball ramp, thing, so you can kind of aim your ball. And even if you hit a bumper, it's not going to go in the gutter. It kind of keeps going, and then you can score points. And the reason they do that is because the bumpers keep your ball out of the gutter so you can keep playing the game. And if you keep playing the game, you're going to learn how to play it better, and you continue to be successful, and you continue to score more points. And then it's an enjoyable game to play. And then eventually you pull the bumpers back and you can do it yourself. And so for me, I've had a lot of bumpers. I've had people in my life who have kept me out of the gutter, moving down the path, not necessarily in a straight line. I'm one of those people who never does anything in a straight line. I've learned a lot of hard lessons in my life, and I prefer to do things kind of learning the hard way because it's the only way that it really sinks in. I was told as a kid that I had a really hard head, but I've hit it a lot of times, and so maybe there's some soft spots, and as I'm getting older, they're getting softer, and so things sink in faster. I don't really know, but I do know that hard lessons have been kind of my proving ground, and the bumpers have been there to keep me in the game. And just kind of thinking about these people, and of course, for a lot of people, your parents are a bumper, and they're kind of a lifelong bumper. And hopefully, when I say lifelong, meaning that you come into their life and you get to see them through the end of theirs. There's some situations where it's the other way around, and it really is difficult, I think, for a parent to have to say goodbye to their children at the end of the child's life. And so hopefully it's the child saying goodbye to the parent, thanking them for all the wisdom and guidance and everything that they've done and all that fun stuff. For my people, I have a handful, and they're all outside of my parents for very specific reasons. And so the earliest influences that I can remember that mark me still to this day, definitely my Aunt Tracy and Uncle Marty. We used to spend a couple weeks of the summer at their house. I think my parents were glad to get rid of us. My aunt and uncle, it's kind of mixed if they were glad to have us, but definitely the closest family members I had throughout my entire childhood. And my Aunt Tracy was really just kind of like a no nonsense kind of person. She didn't really put up with a lot of BS. And I was the one who was going to give a lot of headache as a child because I was that kid, the problem kid, the Dennis the Menace, whatever. That was me. And she really did a good job letting me know that I could choose that path, but there were consequences. But my Uncle Marty, I remember him being like fun. He was like, when I was a kid, he was larger than life. This is the guy who was a dairy farmer, and he would catch snakes with his bare hands, and he would bring home rattlesnakes. And I think at one point he had a couple of pet raccoons, and he would mess around with alligators and all this stuff. And like, he was just not afraid of anything. And as a young man, it taught me, as a kid, especially, like, to be a little more brave around some of these things that just seemed kind of dangerous. But the fun thing about my Uncle Marty is he's the one who really introduced me to a lot of the music that I hold dear now. And certainly as a musician and as just a music lover in general. I mean, this is the guy who, I don't remember exactly what the surface of the floor was, but I remember it being slippery, and he would put down baby powder, and we would like learn how to break dance while watching like VH1 or something like that. And so with my Uncle Marty, I learned about a lot of music. I was exposed to bands like, Run DMC and Aerosmith and Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue and Jimi Hendrix and Elton John and Garth Brooks, and just like all over the map. All of these great artists, George Strait, and just a lot of those kinds of of people that I probably would eventually found, but I found them much, much younger because of him. And even when I was 9 years old, my parents did not allow me to have good music in the house, like rock music. I've always been bent toward the rock style and metal and that kind of thing. And they never allowed me to have it. So he snuck me a copy of a cassette tape that was kind of taped over. And yeah, there's probably some copyright infringement here, so I hope I'm not getting anybody in trouble. But he slipped me a copy of Pink Floyd's The Wall. And at 9 years old, this music just like blew my mind. Um, but from those two, I learned consequence in a different way than I learned it from my parents. And I learned adventure and music, and you can have fun and be young at heart, even as an adult. Even, they didn't have a lot of resources. They weren't by any means, they didn't have money or anything like that, but we always had a great time. We always had just good food. I remember eating a lot of fried chicken with them and listening to great music and having a lot of great time. And just so many of my childhood memories are tied to that. And then as I got just a little bit older, a couple by the name of Mike and Nancy came into my life, and they showed me a completely different world that I had never had any exposure to. And that's where my affinity for Florida State football came from, because at about 7 or 8 years old, I met them, and they took me to my first Florida State game, and it just now is like a lifelong thing. And some of my education came from Florida State as a result. And they were people who were very significant to me at a very short window of time. And then they had about a 10-year absence from my life for various reasons. And then I found them. I sought them out when I was about 20, 21 years old, found them. And since then, they've become another mom and dad relationship. And we lost dad in 2015. And to this day, there's still a lot of things that from them that I learned. I learned, I saw some of the finer things. I saw, I was at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, whatever, in Orlando when they set the world record for the most number of people playing the song Louie Louie at the same time. And there was something like, I don't know, several hundred. I mean, there's just guitarists everywhere playing Louie Louie at once. And I got to see that as a kid. And I learned about food and culture and art. And the most important lesson that I learned from them is that it's nice to have success. This is what you can work toward. This is what life looks like when things are in the right order, when you have the right priorities financially, family. These are the things that are important, but stuff is stuff. And it's nice to have stuff, but stuff is stuff. And people, relationships are really what matters. And I got to see that at a young age too. And so very fortunate. But as I said, I was kind of the kid who was a bit of a troublemaker in middle school, and like 5th, 6th, and 7th grade, I was in a lot of fights. I was very undersized. I had my mouth, I think, was bigger than my height of my body, and I caused a lot of trouble and would not back down from a fight, and would very seldomly back down if I were being picked on. And often I was good at observing the situation to decide whether or not I should engage. And I was often outnumbered. So, that's the way that worked. But I remember in 7th grade, my parents were at their wits' end with me. And I was, what was that, 13 or something, 12, 13, at their wits' end. And it was, you need to pick a sport and you need to improve yourself. And if you don't, then your alternative is we're sending you off to the Florida Sheriff's youth ranch for a couple of years and see if they can straighten you out, because they just couldn't. By hook, by crook, by prayer, by switch, by belt, by whatever, I was still just problematic and for whatever reason. And well, there were reasons, but anyway. Um and and so I said, you know what? I've always kind of liked karate and Bruce Lee and all that stuff, so I want to do karate. And my parents, this was a stretch for them. They could never afford for me to do organized sports. And I still to this day don't know exactly how they were ever able to pay for me to do the karate, which at that time I think was like 35 bucks a month or something, which is insignificant. But this is 1993, 94, 95, somewhere in that range. And you know what, I want to say 90, 94, 95, and 96 is when that's when I did the karate. And my Sifu, his name was Bob. And I actually looked him up a few months ago, and he's still instructing karate and still doing his thing. But I remember him as this just like, just a guy who was very simple, did not live a big life, and but just was calm and cool and collected and fun, hard. Hard. In fact, one time I got in a fight where I defended myself. It was literally a one hit, technically a 2-hit fight. I got kicked. I punched back. That was the end of the fight. I got suspended for 2 days. And when I went to my next karate class, I had my father made me tell him what happened, and made me tell Sifu what happened. And so my punishment, even though I defended myself, and even though I could have done a lot more to this poor kid at that point and at that stage of my training, I still, that entire class had to do leaps up and down the dojo. In the dojo, I don't know, it might have been 20 feet long. I don't know off memory. Things often seem bigger in your mind than they are in reality when you're thinking about things that happened 30, 40 years ago, whatever. And so I had to do that leaps the entire class. And if I stopped, he stopped class and made sure that I kept going. So, but from him, I learned discipline, and I learned the art of controlling emotions. Because in physical activity, and especially when you're in a fighting sport, if things aren't going your way, or if you're down a couple of points in the sparring match, it's very easy for emotion to take over and for you to lose your technique and swing wildly, or change your composure, lose your ability to focus on what's happening in front of you, and that makes the situation worse. And all of that training in the dojo, when you take it out into the real world, if you're involved in a situation where you need to defend your life, which is all that kind of training is for, it's not so that way you can go beat people up and be this macho, great fighter. It's so that way you can defend yourself only when you need to. It's not all that different than being a responsible gun owner. You don't have the training so you can go around hurting people or machismoing your way through life. You do it so if you have to use it, it's your last line of defense, and then you use it very responsibly, just enough to neutralize the situation, control the opponent, or take the opponent out of the game if they are intent to take your life or the life of someone that you care about. You completely neutralize the situation, take them out. And he taught me that art of discipline, emotional control, using just enough force for what the situation needs, no more, no less. No less is definitely important. And I remember there were times where we would have Saturday class, and I got to a certain belt where we were the first class. And so as the first class, we would go to breakfast with Sifu and some of the other instructors, and then go to, work out for a couple of hours at the dojo. And I think just that exposure, we went to Puerto Rico together. I fought in an international tournament when I was in 8th grade. in San Juan, and did really well. And seeing him there, seeing him in action, seeing all of these men and women who were high achieving black belts, and um, it just, to me, it taught me something about your ability to stay focused on something and to stay disciplined about something and where it could take you and how skilled you can become, and how respected you can be as well. And I learned that. And the most important thing that I would say to wrap up with Seafood that I learned from him was, there comes a point where you're not always going to be the person who is challenging someone better than you. Sometimes you're going to be the person who's being challenged, and you have a responsibility to give the person who's challenging their fair fight. Because if you go soft on them, they won't learn everything that they can learn from you. The win will come too easy. They won't have developed their skills by testing them against somebody who's better than them. And so if you're in a position where you're challenging someone better than you fight like, I heard this over the weekend, it cracks me up. You fight like you're the third monkey trying to get on Noah's Ark, right? You fight like hell, and you get in there, you get a place on that ark, and it's starting to rain, so you better hurry. You better fight hard. And so that's what you do. But when you're the person who's being challenged and you're the one who has the more skill, and somebody's coming up and they're challenging and they're testing, give them hell so they learn and they can develop, and you can teach along the way. You don't give them hell because you're better and you lord it over them and you make them feel, stupid or whatever. You do it because it sharpens their saw. It helps them move forward. And that's really the art of mentorship. And that's where I think the first level of, or first lesson of mentorship came in. And so from there, I went into high school. Because of my karate experience, a much different person, a much calmer person. In fact, that fight when I was 14 years old is the last time that I retaliated and hit another individual. So I've always said, that's been a long time ago. I'm 42 now. That was when I was 14. The first person who steps up in the wrong time has got just like a lot of pent up aggression coming at him. So we'll see. But I learned how to control my emotion and control that. And by the way, I'm going to tell you that wasn't the last time that I was hit first, but it is the last time that I responded. So anyway, I got into high school. My freshman year, I joined ROTC. I was an Air Force unit. And so I spent all 4 years in ROTC, started off as, I didn't even know anything about anything at that point. And from the time that I was a freshman to the time that I was a senior, when I was a senior, I was the Corps commander, highest ranked, highest decorated officer in the Corps, and learned a lot about leadership there. And, with Sarge, a lot of it was personal excellence, personal mindset, personal development, personal excellence. And with Colonel, because we had a sergeant and a colonel and in my unit, and with Colonel, it was very much leadership excellence, and also aviation, because he was a B-52 pilot in Vietnam War. And so we learned a lot about aviation and avionics and things like that. We took a lot of really cool trips to the Air Force Museum and saw a lot of neat airplanes and things like that. But I learned leadership excellence. And I remember my senior year, I was Corps commander. Something wasn't quite going right. It was early in the school year. We were in Washington, D.C., and I remember we're walking up a hill at Arlington Cemetery. And I guess Colonel read it on my face, and I said, just this isn't happening the way that I want it to be, or they're not listening. The cadets aren't listening to what I'm wanting them to do. And he said, the thing is, when you're in leadership, and especially leadership at a high level, it can feel very, very lonely at the top. But remember, you climbed up to the top. You can see farther than the people who are still climbing. And so you've got to continue to lead, because you're the only person who can see this far up the path. And that has stuck with me all these years later. So that was my senior year of high school. Again, walking through Arlington Cemetery, having this conversation. And absolutely great experience, and I still draw from my ROTC experience a lot, because there's certainly just a lot. Even when I dress up to this day, I know to manage my gig line, right? Which is the seam of your shirt to the buckle of your belt to the seam of your zipper. That all lines up. Um, just little things like that. The way I shine my shoes, my dress shoes, all that stuff, all comes back from that ROTC experience. And then I graduated high school, and at a very young age, in that regard, uh, got married, had a baby. I was 19 when my child was born, and at that point, a little before that, I met an individual by the name of Dave, and at that point, uh, Dave was in a very important position in my life, and I learned a lot from this guy. I learned, kind of how to manage your family as a young man, how to think about the world, how to read politics, um, how to treat money. And I didn't do it very well at an early age, and he helped me through some really hard times, not without payment, though I will say, because I remember there's a couple of times, David built a brand new house, and it was a big, beautiful home, and I needed a financial favor. I needed a little bit of a bailout at that point. I was young, maybe 21. I don't even think I was that old. I think I still was maybe 19 or 20. And so I had to earn it. And the way I earned it was, in November. This is in northern Indiana. So in early November, it's not necessarily warm. It's often cold and wet. Sometimes it's snowing, sometimes it's raining, and sometimes it's just bone dry and the ground's hard and it's cold. And I remember because he just built this house, they didn't have any landscaping done. He wanted to put down sod in this backyard, and the backyard was very long and it went up a hill. And he was like, "Okay, I'm gonna do this for you. I need some landscaping done, so you're gonna do that for me." And I remember thinking I was going to have to, kind of level grade out this backyard to prepare for the sod that was going to come in spring, which in hindsight felt kind of dumb because it was going to snow and it was going to get muddy and it wasn't going to work anyway, but it actually turned out really well. So in November, I drug that entire backyard with a fence, kind of like you do on a baseball field, except I did it with mud and rocks and dirt. And I drug that entire backyard. It took me an entire week to drag it and to level it and to, to hoe out the big rocks and to rake stuff away and whatever. And then in the spring, I helped him lay the sod, and it turned out to be a beautiful yard. And in fact, I even had a chance to take Melissa to this home at some point, all these years. I mean, it was like 12, 13 years later, and show her, hey, this is the backyard that I drug and laid the sod in, and those turnouts for the horses, I helped lay that fence line and set the post and put in the entire fence structure, and a little bit of pride built into that. So Dave taught me a lot about pride in the right way and being a man, and he taught me a lot about faith in the way that he understood it. And the thing I always really appreciated about him is he was always very straightforward, very honest. And there was a part where Dave and our relationship had to change because of who he was in my life. And I remember that there was an encounter that we had, and it was a very angry one because of the situation. And I remember that encounter just absolutely breaking my heart. And later, after the encounter that evening, I remember just sobbing because of that loss of the relationship with him, because at that point it was so important to me. So, somebody who's still, when I do see him occasionally from time to time, at certain events, and he still treats me with respect, and I still treat him with respect. And there's a level of respect that was deeply rooted in a relationship that still, I think, has Samaritan still has meaning to me even to this day. Um, so Dave, served a role around the same time when I was 21, 22. Um, my first professional job, I was a mortgage loan officer. I was young, super young, didn't understand how mortgages work. I didn't know anything about interest rates. I barely knew how money worked. Certainly didn't know how the stock market worked or bond yields or anything like that. But I knew that I wanted to do something better and bigger, and I wanted to learn, and I wanted to have some prominence, and I wanted to do something important and be helpful to people. And so Randy was the branch manager for the mortgage office, and Randy hired me. And I remember Randy, um, when we had our first interview, he just said, "Look, you're young. I'm not. I don't have problems in my office. I don't want problems in my office. I don't have drama. I don't want drama. If you've got problems, there's a tree outside the office. Hang it on that tree. You come to work, do your job, do it well. When you leave, be sure to pick it up off the tree and take it back home with you." And Randy was important because I learned a lot about business from Randy. I learned how to talk to people. I learned how to sell, but not in the icky way. I learned how to help people understand money. I learned how to understand money with his help. And I learned how to day plan. I remember Randy used a Franklin planner, a daily planner, and I remember seeing it on his desk when I was kind of early in my career. And I made mention that I would love to have a planner like that. And he said, "Tell you what, if you hit this level of production this month, I'll buy one for you." And I took that as a challenge and exceeded that level of production. And so I got not only the day planner, but I got the really nice, sweet leather binder, like super, super primo. And I learned how to plan my day with Randy. I also learned how to play golf with Randy. Randy is the person who gave me my first real and real good Cuban cigar. I learned how to be a bit of a cigar connoisseur starting with Randy. And to this day, that's still one of my favorite passions and vices. I enjoy cigars. I have a group of guys. Josh is in this group. Josh, my producer over there, is in this group of cigar guys that I smoke with regularly. And it's just something that we enjoy doing. And it's great time. And it's just, it is what it is. And so there's just some man stuff that I learned from Randy as well. And I still kind of carry a lot of his lessons with me as well. Randy's no longer with us. Randy died at the end of 2022, and I think I last saw him probably, I don't know, it must have been maybe 10 years ago. And just somebody that I'm so grateful to have in my life. And so the last person that I would have as a bumper, as I kind of wrap up on at least the section of the people who have been bumpers and mentors to me, the last one I had most recently is a guy by the name of Bradley, which is also a common connection for my cigar guys. And Bradley's still a little hard to talk about because we lost Bradley we're just shy of a year now, and I'm getting a little choked up just with the mention of it, so I'm going to not go this direction. But Bradley, I think, will probably stick with me for a long time. And the interesting thing about Bradley is he's the first mentor level person who also was peer level. That's the first time in my life that I had somebody like that. And, was somebody that I could go to for advice. It's somebody that came to me for advice, somebody that we could BS with, and somebody that would hold me accountable on certain things, and somebody that I would hold accountable on certain things. And it was the first time that it happened. But I learned a lot from Bradley. I think we all learned a lot from Bradley. I can tell you that at his funeral, there were people sharing memories, but what they were sharing was the way that Bradley had touched and bumped and shaped and changed their life in very specific and meaningful ways. And I think that's the point of being a bumper for somebody, is that you're able to leave a lasting impact, one that people talk about for a long time. And I'm currently reading a book that Bradley's cousin Casey sent me after Bradley died, and the book is called "How Then Shall We Live?" And the book is it's about the intersection of faith and science and art through modern history. So going all the way back to, you know, forever ago and then pulling it forward, how those three areas have shaped human thought, human action, scientific discovery, scientific advancement, faith advancement, movements of people, art. It's just it's a very interesting, very heady book. But but in that book, I was reading over the weekend, and this is all kind of part of the nostalgia thing. The book said that the interesting thing about being human is that you can not live forever anymore. And I think I actually may be confusing my books because I'm also reading another book that's kind of very similar. So I may be mixing my what would I call it? My methods, mixing my mediums, if we're gonna go the art way. But anyway, the what I read says the interesting thing about being human is that we do not live forever, but you can live forever through stories and legacy and being there to see your kids grow up and then being part of your kids, your grandkids, and then being part of their kids if you're so fortunate, your great grandkids. And you have multiple generations who know you, were touched by you, were experienced or had an experience with you. You were able to provide some guidance and leadership and mentorship and fun and resources to, and through them you live on. And I think that's really kind of the interesting thing, because as I look down this list, my Aunt Tracy's still with us, my Uncle Marty, they divorced when I was much, much younger. So I haven't talked to my Uncle Marty in I don't even know how long. For Mike and Nancy, Mike left us in 2015. I know Sifu Bob, as far as I know, is still alive. Colonel left us 10 years ago, as well. Kind of, I want to say it was like, well, maybe not quite 10 years ago. Maybe it was 2017, 2018. When Colonel left us, Sarge is still around. Dave is still around. Randy left us in 2022, and Bradley left us in March of 2024. And so even these people who are no longer here, they live on through the stories that I tell and the impact that they've had on my life. So what becomes important is that you have these people in your life who provide mentorship to you, and they are meaningful. You reach a point where you now bear the responsibility to pay it forward. And I've had a few opportunities that I can think of to pay it forward. The most notable one was when our middle son, Skylar, was in high school. His group of friends, there were 5 of them that kind of hung around together, did things together, got in trouble together, all that fun stuff, as you do. I realized that 3 of those young men at that point in their lives did not have a positive male role model or influence or father figure or anything like that. And so I think they probably had, coaches and teachers and other men like that, but nobody in their home. And so I made it a point to round up those boys, and once a month I would take all 5 of them to breakfast and feed them, and I would have them talk, and I would give them a topic to think about. So it was kind of like Jeffersonian style, where I presented a topic and each of them talked about how that topic meant to them. And I remember giving each of them a book. It's by Stephen Mansfield, called Mansfield's Book of Manly Men. And to this day, I still love that book. I still give that book out, especially to young men, because I think it's important for young men to understand that it is absolutely okay and natural in the world to be a man and to test manhood and to grow up to be a man and to do it the right way. And I'm not talking about toxic masculinity, but I'm talking about the role of a man in the world. And there is a very specific place where that is right and proper and good for men to be men. And if you ask me pointedly, I happen to think it's a downfall that we're seeing in society is because men are no longer really being men. We're not raising men like we used to. And I know that there is some problematic issues with that, but there still are some lessons that men learn and some things that only men can do and some roles that only men can serve, that's important. And I'm not downplaying the role of women because I will argue hard for the role of women in the world as being strong and sensitive at the same time, and independent and fierce and leaders and all of that. There's a role to play. But for young men in particular, we either expose them to what the world gives them, which is where I think that toxic masculinity comes from, or we expose them to the things that are right and good and proper about being a man. And so I felt the responsibility to do that. And to this day, 7, 8 years later, I still check in with those boys periodically because I have their phone numbers or we're connected on social media. And I will bump them periodically or send them happy birthday texts or whatever. And they will still tell me stories, or they will say, thank you for, I still remember that one time we did this together, or I remember that question you asked me at breakfast, or, just thanks for being there. I had one of them say that, hey man, I just want to say thanks for being there all those years. Like it still means something to me that you cared. That's deep. Like that, I'm getting like a little cheered up here, but like that's deep, man. Like that, when you have that level of impact on somebody, that's what it's all about, right? Now I got a chance to be a bumper for somebody else, and that's really, really important. So, if you have a chance to be a mentor, you pay that forward and you do it well and you do it excellent, because it's one of the most important things you can give to another person is the ability to help them get to where they're trying to go in their life, especially when they're not as far down the road as you are, or if they have challenges that are different than yours, or bigger challenges than you had. If you're somewhere where they want to go, if you're in a position where they want to grow to, if you're in a leadership role in a corporation and somebody wants to gain promotions to get to where you are, help them. Don't hold them back. Don't hold them down. Don't restrict them. Don't collar them. Don't chain them to a desk. Help them understand how to grow. And I've had several people who have been in the position to be mentors and have chosen the other way for their own benefit. Don't do that to people. Help them get to where they want to go. How this helps you in business is if you have somebody who comes into your company and they're young and full of energy and drive and ambition, and they're prone to make mistakes or whatever. I would think that if you're thinking that you have somebody that you need to fire on your team, maybe instead of pushing that button, maybe you stand back and say, you know what? Is there any way possible that I could lead them better? Is there any way possible that I can mentor them better? Because maybe the problem is me not putting enough into them and less of them. Now, I'm going to tell you that there are some people, it's 1,000% them, and get them off your boat as soon as possible. Throw them in the water, feed them to the sharks, whatever. Get them out, get them off your boat. They're toxic. They're gonna make everybody on the boat sick. Get them off. But I know that sounds harsh. Does that sound harsh? I think that sounds harsh, but I mean it. I do mean it. Get them off the boat, throw them in the water, move on with your life, whatever. But there are some people who don't deserve to walk the plank, and you just need to lead them better. And these can become some of the best people in your company. And so when you have people who you can mentor and you're growing and grooming them to be leaders in the future, teaching them how to sell your products, how to service clients. And when I say sell your products, I feel like I always have to put an asterisk on this and be like, I'm not talking about like how to talk people and convince them and twist their arms and pretzel them, and use all the tie down closes and all that other stuff. I'm talking about like how to identify and uncover the needs that somebody might have and match that with solutions and products and advice that you have to offer, based on your expertise, your knowledge base, your inventory, whatever it is, right? Whatever you know how to do, somebody needs it. Match those things together, match them well. And you only do that by uncovering needs and solving problems, not by getting them to buy something so that way you benefit, which, by the way, is my problem with my industry, because there's an awful lot of salespeople. They tend to be selling insurance and annuities and mutual funds. And really, the only interest often that's served by those encounters and those purchases are the person selling the product, not the person buying the product. But I'm not going to stand on that soapbox today. In the meantime, teach people to do that well, grow them up in your company. It's going to make your company more profitable. It's going to make it sharper operationally. You're going to have a best in class workforce. You're going to be voted as one of the best places in your town to work. You're going to have a culture that's healthy and vibrant and thriving. And here's what happens when you have that culture. And I only know this because I've built it before in the company that I was with before I became an advisor. We worked really hard as a leadership team to change and shape and mold a culture in a way that we wanted. It didn't mean that people didn't do things incorrectly or make mistakes or whatever, but it meant that it's a self-correcting, self-reinforcing culture. And what that means is that you set the tone, you show the tone, right? Or as John Maxwell would say, show the way and then go the way, right? As a leader, set the tone, move that direction. People will follow or they will vote themselves off the bus or the boat. I think the boat. I used the boat analogy, so let's stick with boat. They'll jump in the water because they'd rather be in the water than on your boat because your boat's weird. They might call you a cult or some weird stuff like that. But anyway, you get those people off your boat and you keep moving forward, you keep sailing. And what happens is as people come into the organization, they will align with the culture, and hopefully initially they do, which is why you hire them. And if they start to go afield, the culture, the people inside of your company will reinforce your culture because they will have something that they want to protect and they won't want an outsider coming in and poisoning the well. They'll kick that person off the boat for you or they'll march them into your office as I've had before. And it will be like, this person is poisoning the well. Fix them. We need to fix this. How do we fix this? I'm tired of this. This is what's happening. I need some help. We've tried this out in the field and we can't get anywhere, whatever. And you sort through those things and those people will usually vote themselves out. And that culture, as I said, it makes you more profitable. It makes you operationally consistent and stronger. The other thing it does is it makes people more likely to stay longer and to be loyal. And when you need to change direction, they're more likely to change direction with you and help you change the direction rather than resist the change of direction. Because change is hard for most people. Very few people like change. But if you set the tone right and you have a mentorship model within your corporation and within your culture, people will move with you. And as the leader, you got to where you are as a leader because somebody helped guide you along the way, right? You had help getting there, I would say. Very, very few people get at a very high level on their own. And if they do get there literally on their own, then they often will have some issues and kind of blow up a little bit and need some guidance. And often those people still seek out guidance in the form of therapy and consultants and things like that. So nobody in this world is able to get further down the road by themselves. It takes a little bit of wind at your back to help push you along. It takes a little bit of a cheer section when you're getting tired and when things are hard. And it takes some people who want to walk with you when you're facing an uphill battle or a fight or something that looks insurmountable, some obstacle, some big, hairy, audacious goal in front of you. It takes people helping to move that forward. And as the leader, since you've had help others, set the tone, be a mentor, create a culture of mentorship, and you'll go much, much further, much, much faster with more people with you. It's harder to go alone. It's much easier to go with others. And to go with others, you got to be somebody who wants to be gone with, if that makes any sense. Right? And so surround yourself with people who want to go, and you want to be somebody who people want to go with. And that's how you do it. So as I wrap up here, the beautiful thing about mentorship is that maybe at some point you sit in a chair like I just did and you tell stories about very specific people um, in your life who have made a huge difference and have marked you and have helped you become the person that you've become and you continue to become throughout your life. And because I said earlier in the podcast episode that that music is a signature for me. Each one of these people, I was thinking about this. Each one of these people, I have a song that's associated with them, and I'm going to keep that to myself because that's my business. Um, but it's just kind of funny. Like every time I hear a certain song, I'm looking at the names now, and I know what song that is. And every time I hear that song, I think of that person. And it's just kind of funny how that happens. And they again, the important thing here is that they stick with you. And they stick with you for a reason because they were put in a position to lead you, and they did, and they chose to do so. And as I said, at some point you're going to be put in a position to pay it forward, and I hope that you will choose to do so. So that's what I've got for this episode. This one went a little bit longer than I thought it might, but it really is fun to kind of tell those stories and share those stories. And I hope that you can tell and share your stories of people that have been your bumpers as well. And like I said, go be a bumper to somebody else. If you do anything in 2025, you've got all your other goals, add to the list, be a bumper for somebody, and just plug in. And you can do that, at work. You can do it in your home if you have children. You can do it in your neighborhood. You can do it at the YMCA. You can do it at the Boys and Girls Club. You can do it through Big Brother, Big Sisters. You can do it through Rotary. You can do it at church. I mean, there's all sorts of places to plug in and serve somebody and help them get to where they want to go. You just got to find it. Put it on your list. I'd love to hear how you're doing that. Send an email to info@lifemoveswealth.com. Tell me how you're going to bump somebody this year. I'm going to look for the next way that I can bump somebody this year. I feel like I'm always bumping because we have young adult children and they still are needing and seeking guidance. It's really fun when your kids go from they don't want to listen to anything that you tell them because they know better to fast forward a few years when they're in their early 20s, they're coming back to you because you know better and you can help them get to where they want to go. And I love that transition. It's a lot of fun. So hang in there if you have teenagers. They will come back. They will seek your advice. They will listen to what you tell them. And more, I had a preacher who is also no longer with us, Mark Beeson, probably one of those people who bumped me in a very significant way as well. But he said when it comes to kids, more is caught than taught. And what that means is that they're going to grab a lot more than you realize, and you won't see it for a number of years. And then when you do see it, it's a beautiful blossom. So that's it. Go be a bumper. Go be financially awesome. And until next time, take care of yourself. Share those stories. See ya. Thanks for listening to this episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. To learn more about your financial purpose, visit lifemoveswealth.com.